Good evening, everyone. It is May 14th, 2023. Let's try and get into this as quickly as possible. Now, coming into last week, I was all bulled up. You can see that right on the screen there. I was thinking we would get our move above that 4160 to 70 critical resistance that I had, and we could start looking at new highs on the year. This was mostly. The thought process was mostly coming from the fact that the Nasdaq just looked primed to break out and hit that 13,500 number, which it did. It came to 494, if I recall correctly. 498 quarter was the real number, 500 just being the easy number to say. And the NQ did get up there. Now, what I want to note this week is that the ES was unable to break 4160s during the RTH. I don't even think the external trading hours got up there, uh, got up beyond 4170, maybe by a point or two. Meanwhile, the Nasdaq was making new highs on the year, and it achieved the big number that I was looking at this week, which is that 498. You can see it hit 494 quarter, and then we had our sell-off. Uh, so overall, the ES is just extremely weak to me. We're just trading in this gap sandwich right now. We got the one above that I think closes at 4184 or something like that, and then we have one below. So we have two below going to about 4094 if I recall correctly. So we're just playing in this gap sandwich, and these ranges are getting really small. This week's range on the ES was the smallest range since November 2021. If I recall correctly, something like November 15th that week. So extremely small ranges, and the market ES is unable to push up, while the Nasdaq meanwhile is making new highs on the year continually, just ramping up. And this oh no, this big red day that we had, it held the quarterly high back here, this March 31st high. It held that quarterly high and ramped up into the close. We'll get more into the details on that. Let's start talking about this. How am I looking at the ES this week? Well, let's look at the news. 8:30 Empire Manufacturing, Tuesday retail numbers, Thursday unemployment and Philly manufacturing, and some existing home sales. Friday is going to be the main day. I probably won't be trading it. Not only is it options expiration, you also have Jerome Powell speaking. I'm not sure what event it is. It might be a nothing burger. I don't know. I don't really care, to be quite honest. OpEx mixed with J Pow means probably have some pretty gross action other than the first 30 minutes, maybe 60. So I'm not looking for much into that Friday, but overall, not a crazy news heavy week. Uh, I want to note that on the ES, we could not get up to last week's first standard deviations of VWAP on the week. We almost got to it on the upside. We didn't even come close to the downside. Average prices and the ranges are still shifting upwards just slightly. Uh, Notably, the week prior to this past week, that third standard deviation, sorry, last week's this past week we just had, that third standard deviation of weekly VWAP is the same as the week prior to that's first standard deviation. So that just tells you how much ranges have compressed. Is that the third standard deviation of this week's VWAP is only the week prior's first standard deviation. So we're just trading tighter and tighter and tighter. And with that, we've accumulated a shitload of volume around this 4138 number. I want to just quickly modify that. There you go, 4138 flat. We've accumulated a crap ton of volume at that 4138. Uh, so to me, what I'm thinking is, and on top of all this, the breadth is getting worse and worse and worse. So to me, what I'm seeing is an inability in the overall market, the S&P, the ES, SPX, SPY. The overall market is unable to lift, while tech, which is, let's be honest, that's pretty much what we're trading, while these heavyweights are ripping to new weekly highs. I think someone wrote Nvidia or some crap is up 10% the past 6 months, or whatever it is. Uh, while these tech stocks are having, some pretty good days, this thing cannot move anywhere. Forget about hitting, this kind of balance high, these 4180s, 4170s. We couldn't even get above 4160 to 70. So I'm leaning towards the downside, and if I'm really honest, I'm going to be looking for us to start trading down to the March lows, and I'm aware where that is. That is the yearly open. That's down here, 3830 ish. not too far off from the yearly lows. I've flipped a bit bearish here. As long as ES is just being depressed and unable to lift along with the rest of the market, I don't see how you could look at this any other way. Let's talk about the Nasdaq now. My main thesis in starting trading this about 3 or 4 weeks ago was that this thing is distributive as long as we're below 13,500s. And you'll note that is exactly where we got our selling 494 quarter. Uh, this thing looks all bulled up. I'm sure it does. You know, we had that trend line down during 2022, and oh wow, look, it's just been ripping ever since we got firmly held above it. It's been ripping. Yeah, sort of. It sort of has. The reason it's been ripping so much is because it fell so hard on its face. We're not even at the reason I have that 13 half number, 13,500, is because that is the prior year's 2022, that 2022 halfback coming at 498 quarter, and I believe the prior year's value area high somewhere around 570 ish, somewhere something like that. So it's 13,500. So as long as we are below that, we haven't really made any meaningful progress on these things. So far, you can just think of it as one giant dead cat. To me, there's no reason to be extremely bulled up on this a very high time frame. So overall, this looks distributive to me, and overall, we just hit that number and have sold off. So to me, coming into next week, I want to see how we support these prices. Now let's get into that. Uh, we did a really great job during that sell off holding that Q1 high, like I mentioned, from way back here on March 31st. The external trading hours almost tagged the week prior's VWAP close and the point of control, which is that 13,200 number. That was during external trading hours. We didn't come close to it during the RTH. I think we were 30 points off during the RTH, up above 230 or something like that. To me, this has meant that buyers have been defending their average prices really well. If you recall, the week prior to this, uh, these lows down over here, this was the VWAP close from the week prior to that. It was the VWAP close, the point of control, all that sort of stuff. So we held it there and we couldn't even tag it last week. Uh, we closed the week above the week prior's high. We closed above the week prior's VWAP 2. We closed at this week's halfback above where 70% of the volume was traded. So to me, overall, yeah, it was a really bullish week. We did a great job there. Now, what I want to make sure we note is that 95% of the volume that was done this week was within the first two standard deviations of weekly VWAP. So the ranges were relatively small. The entire weekly range was small relative to the average price. So we didn't really expand range too much. And I want to also note that the weekly point of control never shifted up. After this Monday, Tuesday action at the lows, where am I looking here? This action at the lows, it never shifted up from here. It just kept it. We never got a full distribution, if you ask me. So overall, what I want to note is this: this week's VWAP close is coming in at, I think it's our support right now. Yeah, during this overnight, it is our support. It's right around that 350-ish number, 360, kind of where we're trading right now. Uh, that's going to be a very hard price to support. That's just a fact. That very likely will be broken. It's more likely that we start testing the lower and lower VWAP closes. It's likely that we go ahead and test last week's point of control at 280, kind of the bottom of this pivot zone. It's likely we test the week prior to that's VWAP close, which we held during the external trading hours, which we almost got to during the external trading hours. This kind of 13,200 number. And honestly, I stay pretty bid biased. I know our pivot is 13,300. I've got a pretty good long bias until about 13,100. To me, this is that major demand zone, if you want to call it that, on that Friday. But overall, I think it is healthy for the market to test those old VWAP closes, see what's there, see if we have buyers who are still at those average prices from those weeks, and then we can see if we can get up above this 310 to 330 ish number once again. Whatever. This quarterly high up to, I don't know, kind of like the week prior's high. So I want to see us test this sort of area and then come back up, and we can see if we can push up to higher prices. But overall, this week on the Nasdaq, I would expect some good two-way trade. It's probably not going to be as bid as it was this past week, just because we have finally hit that very high time frame target at 13,500. On the ES, I think this thing's just going to be very, very sloppy. I had some sort of support at 40.94, 40.80ish, but I think after spending an entire week in this 56 point range, if I recall correctly, what is that? Is that the external trading hours range, something like that? 61.5 is the external trading hours. Uh, After spending a week in this tiny, tiny, tiny range, I think that if we do move down, we're going to get a move down into kind of these lows, 40.76 ish. We see if we hold 4100 or if it's resistance, and then we see if we can rotate lower. So overall, looking for a little bit of downward movement this week, especially on the ES. I would rather play the short side on the ES, and on the Nasdaq, I think we'll have some really nice two-way action as on these higher time frames we clean out the market, we test these lower levels, and then we can see if we can find bids on the way up, and then watching for that Friday OPEX and Jerome Powell. So overall, hope that makes sense. Tried to get through all this crap as quickly as I can. 11 and a half minutes. Oh, geez. Have a great night. Trade safe, and I hope this was a nice overview for the week ahead. Have a great night.